My name is Jean-Michel Chapon. I work for the DigiWorld Institute. We are a European think tank. I'm going to talk today about big data, and I will try to demystify all the technology and the buzzwords around big data, because big data is happening, it's happening now, and operators need to be ready for it. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jean-Michel Chapon. I work for Today Consulting. I represent DigiWorld Institute. DigiWorld Institute is a think tank. We focus on telecom, media, and internet. And we also provide research, consultancy, and seminars and forums for the senior executive of the telecom, meeting on a regular basis. So we meet once a month in London, also once a month in Paris, in Brussels, and we discuss things that matters and shape our industry, telecom industry. So does big data matter to our industry? Well, yes, it does. And I'll go you through that. I entitled this Big Opportunity or Big Headache. So I hope that this morning I will share with you the opportunity. And as far as the headache, as you probably noticed, I'm French, so the accent may give you a headache this morning, but hopefully I won't reach out to play it that easily. So we're going to cover those various aspects. I'll go through an attempt to define big data and all the buzz. Why is it happening now? Because actually there's a convergence of various factors that make it only can happen now. And we'll look at what are the technology and enablers. You will hear about the buzzwords, the Hadoop, and so on. So we'll try to break the glass and see demystify a bit some of those aspects without being too technical. We'll go through who's active on big data and what are the players, what's the offering, what are the software we can see out now, and also look at the traditional French debate, the for and against, because there's also a counter-trend on big data as well. I'll touch very lightly on that. And at the end, of course, I'll tell you what to remember at all the things I would have said. So what is big data? Is it just big? To define big data, it's actually much more than that. And as we can, I'll let you to read this definition, but it's about having much bigger than the data one you could think of, because if some of those data is coming through and feeding those systems, they're coming so fast in, actually we didn't have time to copy them, to move it on the disk. It's coming that fast. We're taking, for example, 12 terabytes of Twitter data coming every day. If you want to move 12 terabytes of data, it'll take you slightly more than 24 hours. So that's kind of aspect of what we call a term of volume. It's variety as well. It's very different formats. If you had to be given a project in the ideal world of big data, you will have this very nicely structured with relational database and plenty of indicators and so on. On big data, you don't choose the format. The format comes to you. It could be images, it could be sound, it could be unstructured databases. It's all things that you have to play with that you haven't chosen. So that's going to be, I think, one of the key challenges. And also velocity. Velocity means it's moving super fast. There's two types. You can either have the data which is there sitting and you're going to analyze it later to make sense out of it, or you're going to take the pulse of the data which is happening live. That means you have to do the processing and all the thinking of the analysis as it goes, because you don't have the luxury of thinking through and taking the data, seeing it there, and then making sense out of it later. All the processes have to be done so they can happen as the time goes by. I'll give you an example. For example, if you had to analyze SMSs on specific stocks market or something like that, in the ideal world, you would like to know who sent the SMS, where were they in the city, were they in financial center. So you'll have a MAC address, for example, for your SMS, and then you have maybe the address of the people who sent it, and so on and so on. But SMSs were not designed for that. So it just illustrates that you have to take it as it comes, and you have to analyze that kind of aspects. Why is it happening now? We have a combination of factors. On the top of the chart, at this level, this is a technology aspect, and on the bottom, it's more kind of the human side, the soft side. On the technology side, we can notice that processing is becoming more and more cheap. And if you put a graph on the cost of processing and processors, it goes down. So now it's definitely a commodity for some of the basic stuff. We all have our phones, processors that 10 years ago were available in the super duper PCs for a fortune. Those are now dead cheap. Commoditized access, everybody, every time is connected all the time. All the time, ubiquity of the access. So we all are connected on a smartphone, on email, and all these things make it that actually there's a huge amount of data flowing everywhere. And storage is cheap as well. We're piling up huge amount of data. We have all, as individuals or organizations, either willingness naturally or maybe a pressure from regulation to store and to hoard data just in case we need it one day, and we have duplicate and triplicate. So there's a huge amount of data that storage is cheap. So those are the very much the technology. And at the same time, what we've got is the urge to share. That is all the people who are Twittering, Facebook, all the social network phenomenon, and all the emails and everything, and all our lives are becoming more and more digital. I mean, you'll see all the people who are arguing for this lack of privacy or privacy, but that's the first aspect. Beyond that, also, we have multiple devices. You also have the Internet of Things. We're going to have millions, we're above now 100 million of smart readers. You have all your phones with GPSs. I don't know if you noticed, but nearly every day or every week, you have an update on your app, on your smartphone, telling you that your phone or your application can turn on your GPS and track this. So you have also a lot of opportunities to collect all the data with the Internet of Things. The last point is very much a belief that you will need to have is that data explain behavior. It's very important because if you don't subscribe to that view, obviously it's going to be a challenge to find the insight into the data. Accumulating the mass of information, you're going to draw a relationship between what you observe and what you want to find out, what's the insight and the value. And binding all these things together, that's where the opportunity is transforming those data and those mass of information to monetize it, to derive the value, to get the insight, to make a relationship. You'll need to be smart on the way what is cause and effect, because you can monitor actually one or the other. You will not necessarily be able to make a clear relationship between the two, but you'll know there will be a relationship. And that's the very, very important aspect. So on one side we have the data with large volume and all the things we described, non-stop data live, different format, different sources. And on the other side you have the purpose, what you're trying to achieve. And here you've got to be smart on what exactly what you're looking at. And to move from one side to the other, we're going to use the process, and I'll take you through some of those steps. What's important is that as you go through that, you're going to pull on existing skills, existing in belief and competencies who are available within your organizations, but others you'll have to draw from outside, because it's a different way of doing things, a different way of handling what you've done before. The data collection, so obviously it's going to be from heterogeneous part. We're going to talk about Facebook, Twitter, social networks, machines, and so on. And you're going to have to mix them together. So if we go to the next, what we call fusion of data. That means you're going to mix, for example, a social network data with a point of sales data. So you're going to monitor the sales at the till, and you acquire all these, imagine all these supermarkets and hypermarket, collecting and sending huge amount of information, and in parallel to that, you're going to notice what the buzz on the brand that on the sales campaign you've done. So you can have, you can see there's a relationship between the buzz you create on a social marketing campaign and the sales, and you can see the immediacy and all the lag that we can be between the two. Or you could have imagine smart advertising boards on the we're going to see more and more of those in shopping malls, and also the impact you have on sales and the till with the lag you can expect between the two. Or you could go on a negative statement on Twitter and on the stock price. Those things that has been done. So that's kind of aspect when you look at very much sales and the purpose. You'll have other type which is slightly more without human intervention. I'm talking about traffic management. If you have how the traffic light can switch on and off, or based on the volume of information you can collect. You can have, for example, infrared detectors in towns will monitor how many engines or how many people you've got in shopping malls, and based on that you can remove and accelerate the escalators, lifts, traffic lights, and so on. So that's very much these things. We use this kind of stuff as well, mixed with that, for example, live translations. When you have automatic translations, whereby optimization of the system and the way people correct the translation, the machines change their behavior and start to learn better. So that's kind of an aspect we can discuss. So all of those are very much important where you go on your purpose. And going back to the previous slide, you can see that each of the aspects I discussed can actually be one here, there, or there. So it's going to be very much spread across. But the point is, it's more about finding out new way of doing things. So what are the bricks available to build our foundation on big data? Well, those are the buzzwords that you can hear about or you read in the press and so on. So I'll try to demystify some of those. NoSQL is actually not the software, not programming. It's just features that encapsulate all the ones who are below. And it goes by opposition at SQL, which is structured and relational database, where here we don't have this. So it's a bunch of tools and system management for database has been created and encapsulate all the one below. MapReduce is very much something that's been developed by Google in 2004. It's the idea that because the data is spread across various sources, you have to break down the processes. And it's going to be like a parallel processing. So you break down the where they are, and then you can break down as well the processes, so they can expect the data is one point, you can process it, and once that's done, the process is done, the outcome is sent to another server or another piece of processes which is going to massage it and make the result. So it's very much the idea of breaking down, so mapping where the information is, mapping where the process is, and then reducing the volume of work so that actually you don't transmit the full aspect of it, but just the outcome of those tiny processes and bring it back together. And similarly, we have Hadoop and big tables. All of those are actually coming from a different world than the traditional data players we've got. And they have been designed for people who had to face the problem in the first place. I'm talking about Facebook, I'm talking about Google, talking about Amazon. Those are the very much aspect of the players who had to create those. Dynamo was coming from Amazon, I think, and Cassandra from Facebook. So those are kind of similar solutions and concepts being brought by the players who had to handle the issue. Of course, to do all of that, because we're talking about large volume, we have the enablers, which is cloud computing. And that's quite new, because such a big thing happening now. You would expect back 10, 15, 20 years ago that only the big players will be able to do it with mainframes, and you have the usual people coming in to play. But because we have now cloud computing, it means that the barrier to entry on big data is actually very low. And as we monitor the market, we can see small startups coming into play with into the era. We also have, obviously, as mentioned earlier, Internet of Things and sensors, all these smart readers and all the devices that everywhere monitor behaviors, and more they are coming connected. And we have web analytics. That's the culture coming from the Google. All these tools are actually being democratized and more available to everybody, even to consumers sometimes, or startups or one-man band and small boutiques that a few years ago were not available to anyone. So who's present on this aspect? Well, Google, obviously. That's the one I mentioned earlier. They provide a software solution for consumers and B2B alike. They have something they call BigQuery solutions, which means that you can actually address an issue, and the data will be sitting on the cloud, and then you'll get the outcome of it. So you don't actually need to own infrastructure yourself. You don't even need to own anything at all, because you just can use the service available. And that provides maps. That's what they use actually for Google Earth. And you probably noticed many services when you mix Google Earth and Google Maps. and you mix with the various sensors. If you make the aggregation, then you have the outcome. That's very much coming from Google. And more it goes and more democratized it's becoming. So as I said earlier, the barrier to entry is actually getting lower. Apache, which is a non-profit organization who had designed the Hadoop framework based on MapReduce from Google. So you can see that everybody's building on each other ideas. IBM, I won't develop too much because we have a speaker from IBM who will tell us more about what the solutions they have. Chemaspheres, they provide software for data analysts based on Hadoop. Again, the same bricks, and people add on value into it to enable users to make queries and visualize and interact with the result. We have SAS. SAS is interesting because they're coming from the traditional world of data. You're all familiar probably with their solutions and the SAS Institute. But they are moving in that bandwagon and with a way of extracting files and basically moving them from one aspect of the traditional data, which is very different, to the new big data world. Similarly, we have EMC, who is coming obviously from the world of relational databases, and they have now a solution, and they have adapted Hadoop on their system. So that's another one coming into play. Amazon, that obviously with their cloud services, they process data from various sources, including from their own storage, but they can also work with other type of storage, because as you probably understood, big data means very sparse, spread across various sources data. So their solution works with their own storage, but also with others. We have Microsoft, who also provide integration of Hadoop in the Microsoft Windows servers to simplify the big data and business in this environment, which means all these things that usually goes to techie and developers and so on, more and more are becoming more accessible and available to other people to be able to break through it. Same way with Cloudera, who is actually have two offerings, one very much geared towards the developers in the technical world, another one who is made to promote kind of business related, so that Hadoop can be used more easily. So those are very much the players that you'll see. There's others coming up on a regular basis. So we'll see there's more and more small players as well. They're becoming very specialized with applications who are dedicated to one specific source of data or interpreting one specific source of data. So you'll find applications, for example, for Twitters or social networks and so on. So you'll see some of those. But as it goes, we believe it will be a kind of an interesting area to watch. Those are very much the key concepts I wanted to push forwards on the big data side. I will look like the other side of the coin, because it's not a rosy picture. There's people who actually disagree with some of those aspects. So I'll look at the counter trend, the dark side of the big data. Things need to be aware because they get also momentum. The first one is the case for small data or beta data. Okay. Big data means that if you analyze the volume of information out there, you can build a relationship between what's been said, what's been talked, or what's been monitored, and actually the behavior. And to derive the relationship with this massive volume and the behavior you want to define, because you want to push your sales, because you want to reduce your churn, because you want to make a better promotion, you need to accumulate huge amount of information. The case for small data is the other way around. Instead of analyzing millions of Twitters and millions of SNSs or social networks and monitoring, what if we could have from the individual themselves what they want? That means you go to an intermediary and you say, my purchasing power is going down, my car is getting old, the bills are racking up, therefore I'm looking for a new car. However, I've just got divorced, therefore I'm looking for a new way of acquiring. And if you come up with something different, like a zip car or whatever, then surprise me and make me an offer. Imagine you make that statement as a consumer, you go to an intermediary, that intermediary will analyze the data and will be the warrant or the guarantee, the buffer between the providers and the demand, the supply and demand. And that you just have just one tiny individual, which therefore will be a kind of broker between the supply and demand. That's that's the case for small data. Of course, at the moment we don't have that yet. What we have is you need to analyze all the information to draw the comparison between the postcode, where that person lives, their personal situation, if you can grab that from one way or another, what they actually want to derive, what the expected behavior, so that you can actually promote for your car. So on one side, you have to analyze the millions of triggers, build a relationship. On the small data case, you just want to do that. It's not also the panacea, because many consumers don't know what they want before you've been offered to them. So it's not either. There's a kind of a school of thought. To pay to keep private. We all think that we are the customers, but actually we are not, because we don't pay. We use Google, we use all these things free of charge. We are not the customers, we are actually the products. People who pay are the advertisers. And the way we pay the benefit for the services is because we give our data. We release the data, and because we pay with that data, the product is free. There's people who say, maybe we should be charged for our Yahoo mails, our Google mails, and so on, and therefore keep the privacy. It jeopardizes completely the advertising and the freemium model, and obviously it's not going to come out anytime soon, because you can't walk away of Google today. It's too late, it's too much there. But that goes back to the vendor relationship. When you have myindex.org, who looks at the way that you have relationship with your suppliers. And those bodies will actually interact and manage on your behalf, based on your desire, the way the data is released and used. That's the other side. So those are really got a blue sky thinking. We don't need them first. However, what's happening here and here is slightly more real. Because in January this year, Vivian Redding believed that consumers should have the control of their data. Which means that if you are a mobile operator and you have plenty of data on your consumers, and that consumer leaves you and asks to erase all the data that you have on him or her, you have to evidence that you've done it. And if you haven't done it, if the law passes through, then the penalty is 2% of the global revenue for breach, regardless if you operate in the EU. Even if you're an American firm, you operate in Europe, you will have to combine, to apply it and to combine. So obviously, it's not a done thing, because you can expect there's a lot of people who are lobbying on the issue. You can't do that. But nevertheless, we can see there's a trend, and that's, I believe, backing up a bit of the one above. And the privacy issue, the law is already stating on this. There's various aspects. You can talk about privacy at the point of collection, where you collect the data, how you use it. You can also say, okay, I'm going to use the data from privately, but because I'm going to make metadata out of the data, so I'm going to assimilate those behaviors and put them into a segment, I can now destroy the initial data, because now I'm using metadata. And that metadata is the result from my value add. It's not related to individual per se. I don't know who it is. I just know I've got a box called that segment, and therefore I can use that. But then as you go along, you'll have a point of interaction as well. Because once you have used that data, you probably want to interact with the consumer. And that, again, the law is looking at did you get permission to email or to call that individuals. So as you can see, that on the privacy issue, there's a few aspects we need to be aware of. Now, coming back to leaving the dark side and coming back to the topic on big data, I believe that the message I want to come across is that it's very different sources of data. So you know that you're going to combine the various things, either from Internet of Things, declarative data as social network and so on, and what we call also the deep web. That's all the data which is not actually coming out from a browser. You have about 90% of the information which is still out there, it's not available, accessible, and that's what we call the deep web. That represents billions of pages, and with the tools I mentioned earlier, you can actually access that information, and that all these forms you're filling and so on, so that's also available. So how to go about it? Well, I won't go too much into it, I'll just give you an illustration. what we observe is there are two camps and two approaches. One is explore the value. You have operators, players, companies who know they're sitting on a gold of mine, but they don't know exactly how and where and how to get it. So they explore the value. That's the exploratory path. On the other side, you have companies who are very much thick and brief data, and they know what they're looking for. They know the relationship they want to establish between those two. So what we observe is some people say, okay, we can't miss out this because there must be a relationship, more kind of I would say, thinking up to the box and more business-driven aspect. On the other side, slightly more technical on the approach. So there's two culture, and you will have to combine those two aspects. And you need to be prepared, but I think the speakers after me will go more into detail. I wanted to illustrate that with something which was typical, because being French and in UK, this week is voting week. We're voting for the French election on Sunday, and today we're voting on the British election. So much voting. So I thought it was topical. On Monday, if looking at the opinion poll, if you're a traditional, let's say, a political party, you want to monitor how things goes on and which email or message you want to go about, you probably have probably a CRM, and you buy probably lots of opinion polls, and you get a picture which tells you on Monday it was 51% Boris and 49 Ken. So you still have the leeway, and you're probably within the margin of error. Last night there was a big debate on French television about a presidential debate on Sarkozy and Hollande. And the day before there was a complaint on the press that the Élysée Palace has spent 6.2 million euros on opinion poll. So that's a traditional way of doing things. The alternative way, the holistic things, is to looking at what's the buzz on the social network. It's a much cheaper approach. And we'll see if big data or social network will back up the result that we'll see in the end of the week. That was late last night, 59-33, as opposed to Monday, 49-51. And that's based on the last 24 hours. Of course, to make a bigger statement, you will need to go beyond just looking at the colors, because it doesn't tell us what's the negative or positive aspect about it. Because if one candidate, say, regardless of the country, says something negative, it will still be noise, but you don't know if it's negative noise, so it doesn't count on the right side. But you can see above that actually the two winners there, obviously, it's a race. We'll see if the elections back up the outcome. But just to illustrate the point that you can go different ways, and by combining the two approach, then you can actually get an insight. And I would believe that if I was today, a candidate for any of those, I will have the intention to spend slightly more money on big data than on traditional opinion poll. Right. So, what I want you to remember from this morning and this brief introduction, I hope I demystified the myth of big data. I touched on the definition, variety, volume, velocity. That definition initially came, I think, from Gartner, and more or less everybody is picking on it, including the big players. That's something I want you very much to keep in mind. The second point I want you to remember is that it's different approach. Everything you've been doing traditionally on relational database will not work in this world. You need to have new tools, new approach, and you probably need new. I don't know how many of you will be more on the technical side, on the business side, but I more believe that the agenda will come to you more than you choose for it, and you probably need to look at different way of doing it. Traditional things will not operate. It's happening now. As Mark illustrated earlier, some part of the world are more leading the way than others, but it's definitely happening now. If I go back a few slides, actually, there's something I wanted to mention here. In these aspects, I believe there's an opportunity for I believe there's a school of thought who believes that operators have an opportunity here to act and to present themselves as the trusted body who are going to manage the data on behalf of the consumers. It's a bit like the banks, basically. It's people that you trust. It's a matter of positioning. You can't get it wrong because the risk is going to be quick, drastic. But it is happening now, and I believe from a mobile operator or from any type of operator who's scared of being commoditized by just dumb pipe, although manning those pipes actually need to be pretty smart. We're far from having dumb pipes. But I believe it's an opportunity for operators to position themselves into this world. And that's why also the last point I want you to remember is that you need to be prepared. Because it's happening with or without you. And the framework on the law and the responsibility to come with it will come to you as well. Whether you like it or not, you have to be ready, and you have to look at those aspects. So even not having a strategy for big data is a strategy in itself, but then you make sure you have the governance that goes with it. You have to make sure you know why you're not going in there, and you actually quite robust on the things you are going to be exposed or not exposed, and you have all the risk and the measure to mitigate those risks. And I think that's the last point. And of course, and people who are speaking after me will illustrate that much better than I can. You have to call on new skills and new way of working. Thank you very much.